Well, less than an hour from now, Bank of America CEO Ken Lewis will testify in Capitol Hill about whether he was pressured by U.S. officials to buy Merrill Lynch despite huge losses at that company. Critics say that doesn't excuse Lewis for going through with a deal that may have harmed shareholders.
In mergers and acquisition transactions, pressure is brought to bear on CEOs of public companies all the time by all sorts of constituencies, creditors, financing, labor unions. And I don't care whether it's the federal government or somebody else. The question is really how the CEO and the board of directors of the corporation react to that pressure.
Okay, well, joining us this morning is someone who's been very vocal about this case. He's Yale University Law Professor Jonathan Macey, and he joins us now. And thanks so much for being with us, Professor.
It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning.
Okay, now you say that Lewis should have quit during that time when he was being pressured by Bernanke and Paulson, or allegedly pressured by them, rather than complete the deal. Does that mean that you put pretty much all of the blame on Lewis for this?
Well, Lewis is the person who has responsibilities to Bank of America and to its shareholders. He's the only person in an executive position standing in the way between Bernanke and Paulson's efforts to have Bank of America bail out the United States and step into the shoes of the government. So he has that responsibility, and so he doesn't get a sort of a get out of jail free card just because somebody in the government calls and asks him to do a thing that's inconsistent with his obligations to the company.
Right, obligations to the company. I think that there's certainly a lot of debate and perhaps some leaning, in fact, as to what Lewis did, in fact, for his shareholders, because, as you know, he lost his chairmanship during that shareholders meeting. But has anything, given your own legal expertise, I mean, has any of what you've heard so far, the reports, any of it actually violate the law?
Well, here's the most intriguing part of this that really has not gotten any discussion, unfortunately, and that is everybody's focusing on the relationship between Bernanke and Lewis. I'd like to see the focus shift a little bit to focus on the relationship and the interactions between Lewis and the Bank of America Board of Directors. Because if you're a member of the Bank of America Board of Directors and the CEO comes to you and says, gosh, I could be fired if I go through with this deal, and this deal is really horrible for the company, it's the board's job to say, you're out of here. It's your job. It's the board's job to say, as a choice between the CEO's position and the welfare of the corporation, perhaps the survival of the corporation, the profitability of the corporation, it's an easy choice for a board. And so was the board informed? What role did they take? Were these people just completely potted plants, completely outside of the loop and outside of the discussion? That would be really interesting to know, because clearly Lewis had an obligation, in my view, to fully inform the board about exactly what his interactions were with Paulson and Bernanke with respect to this issue. And the board had an obligation to move the corporation to do what was best, not for these bureaucrats, but for the Bank of America shareholders, who goodness knows could use an ally these days.
Professor, very quickly here, what are the chances the federal government gets sued over this?
Zero. I mean, nobody is going to be, all the law firms and the companies that might be harmed by this are going to have so many sort of conflicts and issues that this is a political issue, and one that I think it's extremely unlikely we'd see a lawsuit against the government. We may see shareholder lawsuits against the board of Bank of America, and frankly, I hope we do.
Okay, Professor, out of time, but thanks so much for joining us, Professor Jonathan Macey of Yale University.